members present.
Fantastic. Next up on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everybody could please stand up wherever you're at and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United
States of America and to the
republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
indivisible,
liberty and
with
justice.
liberty for all.
and justice for all. Okay, next up on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Schultz and second. I did not. Drake, thank you. Second by Drake. Mr. DeMonte.
Yes.
Mr. Walls.
Yes.
Mrs. Beals.
Yes.
Mrs. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Drake.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
I have 7 yes. Motion carries.
Okay. Next up, under recognitions, we have something about the class of 2020 graduation celebration.
We do. It was just a week and a half ago that we were honoring our class of 2020 in a long-awaited celebration. With a really special celebration for a very special class. I want to start by thanking our board members. I know all of you support our graduation every year, and this year, even with the rescheduling, we had a number of board members who could make it for what turned out to be a very long but fun and rewarding day. So thanks to our board, as always, for your ongoing support. I also want to thank Rob Parrott and all of our staff, but his administrative team, and the time and energy that they put into a very special day and celebration and some great touches. So I know we were worried about that and working on that, and it was long awaited, but a great event, a great celebration. And I just wanted to make sure that we took the opportunity to congratulate Rob and his administrative staff, and Michelle and her administrative staff, and all of our staff who helped out with that day, and allow anybody who's like to say anything to please jump in. Rob?
Yeah, John, thank you. I would probably like to echo some of your thoughts, and thanking you and the board for your leadership and flexibility just to offer the alternate date when we originally got into this and looked at our May date of, maybe not being an option, just to be able to postpone and have a later date. So thank you for that. Just standing on stage and for ordering the beautiful weather. I know you guys had a lot to do with that on that day. But as soon as we kind of altered our date to July 12th at the Sears Center, we put into motion kind of behind the scenes a plan to potentially have a different type of graduation should the Sears Center no longer be an option. And kind of towards the end of May, we realized that was not going to be a feasible option for us. So we kind of followed the ISBE guidelines and went with one of the plans that they had suggested for a drive-through ceremony. It became a very coordinated effort with our staff and students. I'd like to thank Dr. Kirk, hopefully she's on here listening, who oversees our graduation process. Her and I met with our senior class sponsors, Betsy Segala and Val Abarino, who traditionally helped with our graduation ceremony and started to kind of lay out a plan of what we thought this would look like. At this time, I think Val is hopefully out there somewhere. I know she's a little shy, but maybe she would be willing to say a few words too. But at this time, I would like to recognize Val, who really deserves all the credit for the decorations that you saw around the campus with the balloons and ribbons and signage. She literally came up with a plan, designed it, and made it all. Those balloons were not bought balloons. Her and her team of some staff members and family, I know that her family's glad to have her back, because she put a lot of time and creativity and vision into this. She's very, very talented, and I just wanted our community and our students to know, because of her, they benefited from her personal touches to make our campus look awesome. I'm also proud to say that she's a parent of a 2020 grad, so I think that made it extra special for her. So Val, if you're out there, thank you so much for everything you did, and I wanted the board to be aware of her work. So.
I'm here. Thank you very much. If you can't see, my face is probably beet red. I don't like recognition, but I had a
Good job,
great
Val.
time. It was really special, and I'm glad it turned out so well.
Yeah. And then just, I would also like to thank just our staff and administrative team. Laura, Kirk, Matt Jones, and I met around June 15th and kind of really put this vision or plan into full motion. We then followed up with our administrative team around June 23rd and said, this is what we're doing. We divided this into subcommittees, and our administrative team kind of took over their committees and put everything into place. So it wasn't done without a lot of help and coordination from police and security to buildings and grounds and rental of stages and tents and technology and speakers and live streaming and virtual ceremony and food and drink and name readers. Thank you to Amy Lawnagro, Sean Mahoney, and Peter Kupfer, who are our name readers. And probably another thank you to Sue Simpson from the Township and Mayor Kavorek for their support of our event and, kind of allowing us to invite other guests to stand along Almond Road if they wanted to cheer on and celebrate our graduates. Just a huge thank you to our administrative team. I've been around a lot of years now. I've seen a lot of great events, and I think this one is at the top of the list now for my new favorite event in all my years. So just thank you to everybody that helped support the class of 2020 and having just a wonderful day. So thank you.
Rob, great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, nicely done.
Yeah, this is Paul Schultz. Rob, Val, everyone else that was involved. It was an amazing event. I mean, I heard from so many parents that were completely blown away at the scale of the event, the excitement that was going on, and just how much what a great time they had. So thank you very much.
And Rob, you forgot to recognize somebody. You forgot to recognize yourself.
Oh.
And you forgot to recognize Michelle. There's now 3 new greetings that you'll find in the encyclopedia. There's a air high 10, the air handshake, and the air hug.
Yeah.
And I watched you guys do that for about 7 hours that day in the sun. You guys did an amazing job.
Thank you.
Yeah, well done. Thanks, Rob.
Great job, Rob.
And that's all for recognitions today.
Okay. Next up is the reception of visitors. If there's anybody out there that would like to address the board, you're welcome to spend about 3 minutes addressing the board. Put your name in the chat column and unmute your mic. And I know Blake Thomas had already mentioned that he would like to address the board. So if you're still out there, Blake, and you would like to address us, by all means, now's your opportunity.
If it's all right, I'd like to reserve my comments for the second period.
Not a problem at all. Is there anybody else that would like to address the board right now? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the president's report. Couple things I just wanted to bring up to everybody on the board is to make sure you read the weekly letter that went out on Friday. We have a lot of potential future dates for board meetings, and that's really because there's going to be a lot of moving parts over the next couple of weeks. And so we want to make sure that we reserve enough time for us to get together and discuss any topics that need to be brought up, including a possible date for Thursday. The idea was if we don't finish everything tonight, we can carry over to Thursday. Part of the thought in the Thursday meeting at the time was that the IHSA was going to make, have a meeting tomorrow. I understand that's been delayed a week, but just keep all those dates open there if we can. Another idea that I brought up with Dr. Algram the other day is eventually, as we're talking about having a hybrid school and other events, having hybrid board meetings. So when everybody is comfortable and it's allowed to meet in person again, but at the same time, if somebody would like to remain remote, that would be a possibility. It's nice to see everybody face to face and have the conversation, but at the same time, if we go that route, I do not want anybody on the board to feel pressured that you have to attend. By all means, you're more than welcome to still attend virtually. And the only other topic I wanted to bring up was we're going to go over the return to school plan. I know talking to some board members, there's a lot of other questions that may not be directly addressed in the return to school plan. So again, let's try and get through the return to school plan, have that as a conversation, and then really open it up for any other topics that we have, because I'm sure there's other topics that's going to relate to the return to school plan that may not be outlined right there. Are there any other topics that anybody would like to talk about either tonight or at future meetings? Okay, if not, next on the schedule is just the announcement of the 2021 school board meeting schedule. It was approved back in January. It's being announced right now. When you get a chance, make sure you print it off and save all the dates. And the next meeting is not until the middle of August, so we still have a ways to go before our next board meeting. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Next.
The committee reports, I do not think we have had any committee reports since our last meeting. For the superintendent's report, I only have one little piece. It's something that we'll work on over the course of the next year, just for kind of more administrative work, but it is, we'll have board impact. The board each and every year approves a calendar. This year, we're actually having, obviously, the board consider a revised calendar due to our need to make an adjustment in regards to the election day holiday and us needing to adjust some things there. But I did also want to make sure that the board was aware that, we have had a few inquiries from some of our student groups, families about, our designation of Columbus Day as a holiday on our calendar was something that we, by all means, want to make sure we take a look at and look at some other models, or just at least make sure that we're aware of some things. Our calendar is pretty much they do get it to be a mundane approval, if you will. So every once in a while, it's nice when there's a different kind of inquiry about things. And so over the next, before we approve a 21-22 calendar, you might see at least some changes to how we designate some holidays or identify days off, things of that nature. So just a little update that we will probably be just at least reviewing the Columbus Day designation on our annual school calendar. That's all I had for the superintendent's report. Oh, yes, let's see. Hold it, Michael, you there? Michael?
I'm here. Yep, Dr. Holmgren, I'm here.
We are ready for Mr. Engel. I'm going to try to share this mic if this works. I think I have your. Oh.
Perfect. All right, we can go to the next. Yeah, it's showing. You can go to the next slide. That would be great.
Yeah, give me a sec.
I just want to bring to everybody's attention here. I usually go through the revenues and expenditures. This year is quite different, especially with the township being late with the distribution of taxes. Right now, since we are cash basis versus being accrual basis, so we're taking the revenues that we got from 7/1 until 6/30, and it came out to $56.5 million. Expenditures were 71.6. So right now for FY20, we're showing a deficit of just over $15 million. A lot of it had to do with the delay of taxes, which we'll explain, and you'll see on our AFR coming up, and the timing of everything, because we only received half of the half that we would have received before the end of June there, and it actually made things very interesting. We got down to our last couple of dollars, if you will. The next slide here, as you'll notice, the actual year-to-date revenues, we're only showing 93%. If you look at local sources, we're at 89. So again, we're about 10% light of where we should have been as far as state and local sources. Next slide, if you look at the expenditures, we're pretty much right on target. We did have that final June 30th payroll to maximize everybody's earnings there for the year and catching up anybody there in summer school. As you can see, we're almost exactly 100% of projected expenditures, and year-to-date benefits, we're at 95.6%. Overall, we did pretty decent in comparison to last year. Also keep in mind, as far as the revenues were concerned, I know I talked earlier about the tax delay and tax shift, if you will, into the new fiscal year. But keep in mind that local revenues were also down approximately $1.3 million that the district highly relies on in user fees, if you will. On the next slide, you can see the cash flow. It's pay specific attention there to May, and then June you can see the influx of cash coming in that came in through the tax distribution. We are in a lower cash position than we were last year. A lot of it had to do with the capital projects, the finishing up of the solar project, the added safety and security and camera work that we did this year. Just finishing up a lot of the ties, also the roof work that's going on for the summer as well over at Almond and the Oak Plain campus is all kind of taken into effect. If you look at our cash position last year, we're at 42.4 mil. This year we're at 27.3. Next slide. So coming up, I also want to give everybody kind of an update for the calendar for the budget proceedings. We're planning on having a finance committee meeting on 7/28. It'll most likely be remote. At that meeting, I'll have the 5036, which is the ISB format, to go through the budget with everybody. I will also be presenting at August board meeting there on the 18th. The intent is to publish a legal notice for hearing on the 19th, the morning the next day. The same day, the budget will be on public display. On September the 22nd, that's our board meeting then, because it has to be on display for 30 days. The Board of Education will host a public hearing for the budget, and hopefully that same night approve the tentative budget and make it a finalized budget. Any questions on the timeline for the calendar or budget proceedings?
No, but I have a question regarding any information regarding the grant.
No news yet on the Rebuild Illinois grant. I have not heard anything all day. I've been scouring the email. I sent Carrie Matlock an email earlier this morning because I was hoping to share some good news tonight. I haven't heard back anything yet.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Dr. Engel.
No problem.
Next up on the agenda is the consent agenda. If I can get a motion, please.
I move to approve the consent agenda items as presented, which includes Exhibit A, personnel recommendations number 1 through 11 as posted. Exhibit B has no entries. The payment of bills for July 7th, 2020 in the amount of $7,097,443.06. And the regular meeting minutes and executive session minutes of June 23rd, 2020, and the second reading and approval of the district board policy 1:30, district philosophy.
Second. Roll call.
Motion by Drake, second by Schultz. Mrs. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Walls? Mr. Walls? I'll come back to him. Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. DeMonte?
Yes.
Mrs. Beals?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Walls? Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
I have 6 yes. Motion carries.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jean. Next up is new business.
As I made mention to earlier, we have recommended approval of the amended public school calendar. which allows us to put in November 3rd as an election day. And also, we adjusted one day in our first week of school, and we moved one professional development day to the end of the calendar, but just a minor adjustment in our public school calendar.
Any questions on this? If not, I move to approve the 2020-2021 amended public school calendar as presented.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Schultz, second by Anderson. Mrs. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Demonte,
Yes.
Mrs. Beal,
Yes.
Mr. Walls. Okay, Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
I have 6 yes, motion carries.
Next up is the board policy on pandemic preparedness.
Yeah, this is just a first and final reading for a policy that had not been touched for a while due to, there was some pandemic work done a number of years ago on a board policy. So this is an recommended updates to that particular policy to help address the pandemic now and some applications administratively, mostly for administration in regards to the pandemic.
Are there any questions on this policy?
No.
Okay. I move to approve the first and final reading of the district board policy 4:180 pandemic preparedness, management, and recovery.
Second.
Second by Drake. Sorry,
Roll
John.
call.
Motion by Schultz, second by Drake. Mrs. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Beals,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Demonte,
Yes.
Mr. Drake.
Yes.
I believe Mr. Walls is Mr. Walls?
I texted him and he got disconnected. He's trying to get back in, so.
Okay. And Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
I have 6
Okay.
yes, motion carries.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you.
We are back.
I apologize. All right. Yeah, I vote yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Welcome back, Jim. Welcome back, Potter.
I really don't know what happened. I don't know what happened.
Next up is the amendment to the 2021 student parent handbook.
As we look forward, we reviewed in reviewing our back to return to school plans and looking forward to looking to the things that are enhanced health requirements, if you will, that may affect some things in our student handbook. We wanted to make sure that we captured in there some things on face coverings for the time if and when we return to school. The face coverings are required, which they are as an enhanced health requirement. That wasn't in our handbook. We also wanted to make sure that we put in there the correction to the philosophy statement and as well as the school calendar that the board approved, just to make sure those are included in our handbook. Any changes that are made, we notify parents as well of those changes and we post them on our website.
Any questions on this amendment? Not, I move to approve the amendment to the 2021 student parent handbook as presented.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Schultz, second by Anderson. Mrs. Beals?
Yes.
Mr. Demonte?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Walls?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
I have 7 yes, motion carries.
Thank you, Jean. Next up is the return to school plan. Gio, I believe you're going to be walking us through that, or are you going to be doing that, Dr. Algren?
I'm going to lead off and I'm definitely going to pass it over to Chris in a few minutes, probably. I'm going to try to get this presentation back up. Did that happen to pop back up for everyone?
Not yet.
Not yet. Here it
There it
comes.
goes.
All right.
Got it.
So you guys good? Okay. So what we're going to do tonight for everybody, I appreciate Mr. Schultz reminding me earlier, just so if we can, I think myself and Mr. Geocaris are going to run through most of the information in these slides. And then if you have questions afterwards, it might be the best time to take them. We are going to provide a lot of information quickly tonight because we're excited to provide this information for you. We've been working on this now for a while. And we just want to make sure we do share it with the board and as well as community members that may be interested. So first off, we're going to touch a number of things going back to the fall and work through what we call we're going to talk through our enhanced health requirements. We're going to talk through our actual blended and fully remote plans. That's a critical piece to our action item tonight, just that the board is aware of the work that we've put into those learning plans, as well as a number of other items that are related to our return to school. So I first just want to make sure that we thank everybody that was on we had a number of people on our committees this summer working through our pandemic preparedness advisory committees. We are still working. Our plan continues to change. We've said that from the get-go that this plan will continue to be modified as need be in the past and moving forward. And so parent communications, we're on a weekly parent communication kind of cycle. And so we'll make sure that we update the community this week on any decisions that may be made this evening or this week. I want to make sure that we talk, just to go back a little bit to last spring and as we started to work our way into summer, all districts, knowing that we were kind of thrown into this remote instruction last spring, in March, all districts realized that we probably had some improvements to make in our remote instruction, regardless whether it be a fully remote or blended plan. So we spent a lot of time this summer, and Gio's going to talk about this later, just about those revisions that we've made. But originally there was the emphasis for just making sure that our remote instruction is improved, if you will, for the next school year. And as the summer came along, we started getting a number of encouragements from the State Board of Education just to try to make sure that we get as many kids in school as quickly as we can. And the reasons for that was obviously we know that there's many challenges that students face when they're not at school. We also know that many of our most at-risk students are not as likely to be as successful in a fully remote setting. We also know that we want people feeling connected again. And we want to make sure that for our students and staff, entire community, that people are still connecting with us. So these are all the things that we've kept in mind and trying to make sure that we do what we can to get people back here as soon as we can. So I'm going to talk through a little bit. So what we know so far is the week of August 10th through the 14th, that was originally going to have some instructional days in it. In our calendar change that we made, I'm sorry, that jumped ahead. In our calendar change that we made, what we also did was make the whole first week planning. We did that intentionally, just knowing that we'd need 5 days for planning, regardless which format we were in, blended or fully remote. That means that August 17th is our first day of instruction, whether it be remote or in person, or a blended model. We just kind of reestablished our calendar with the first week for planning.
John, do you want me to kick over to the other PowerPoint?
Yeah, you can grab that, Gio. Yeah, this froze up. So Gio's going to kick it on. I apologize, everyone.
Can you stop the screen share on yours while I get this up?
You betcha.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Am I in the right spot, or do I need to go ahead and slide?
One more. You can go one more now. So the thing that we wanted to make sure that we did from the get-go when we started talking about whenever we come back, we had an idea that whenever we're able to come back to in-person instruction, we wanted to at least start with 25%.
Yeah, you will.
So piece is just to make sure that as we do that, we can safely manage new health requirements, which I'm going to talk through. Also create a personal level of connections and reassurance. So you'll see that in our ABCD model later. This is what we were trying to accomplish. Thanks, Chris. So what we did was we started thinking through returning to school. What would an ABCD model look like? And this is still when we're able to do that. We tried to create just kind of an alpha split of our students, A through E, F through L, M through R, and S through Z. This is where we felt really good about starting to try to bring some people back in when we were ready. Then we'll come back later and Chris will talk through the benefits kind of our blended model, but this was kind of our, how can we bring back some people safely? Thanks, Chris. Next. And then we're obviously the other piece that we're going to talk about tonight is our fully remote model, because in the backdrop of all of this, we've been communicating to everybody that we need to be ready to be fully remote at any time and quickly, just because we're not sure exactly what's going to happen in terms of the COVID and in terms of other things that we may encounter. And so we've always been also focused on our fully remote model, which has some significant changes as well. Next. And so I'm going to start to go through those pieces of when we're able to bring students back in, what are the enhanced health requirements that we need to be doing. So this is very important work because it also has to do with our timing of when we think we'll be able to go. So for those people that don't know, the things that we've been trying to communicate is that students are required to do symptom screenings and temperature checks, or that people self-certify before they enter school buildings. This is a brand new set of kind of requirements. Also this year, as I mentioned earlier, we need to make sure that everybody's having face coverings inside the school building with few exceptions. There's fewer than 50 individuals in any one space. That's a requirement. Requiring social distancing as much as possible. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then an increase in school-wide cleaning and disinfecting. So these were the mandates that go along with how to bring students back. So the symptom screening and temperature checks, we started on a process by which students would have to do a process, a self-certification process before they come to school, as well as staff would. And so therefore the logic there is that only students and staff who are healthy would obviously be able to report to school or work accordingly. And if people who aren't feeling well, they stay home. And then similarly, these are all the symptom screenings that are there, including obviously a measured temperature check at home before ever coming. One thing that's important to notice, we've tried to put some notes on things that we've done a lot of work on, but we still have to solidify, if you will. So this is an item that we've got probably down 90% or so that we feel good about, but it's not done. We're still continuing to develop how this might work for all of our elements of our Warren Township High School community. Next, Chris.
I won't have my child die.
Temperature checks. This was kind of a new one that we added. We originally were just going to do self-screening, but just to make sure that we indeed had verification that people did not have temperatures or that they were well when they come into our school buildings, we also have instituted temperature checks as a enhanced health requirement. We still have a significant amount of work to do on this, just in regards to dealing with some of the issues that come out of those temperature checks. So I'll talk a little bit about this later, but we're working on this, but we're not quite ready for this process right now. Next, Chris. And so the other thing that goes along with this, this piece, visitors, we're trying to make sure that we minimize visitors in and out of the building as much as possible. There will be exceptions when we do need to let emergency situations and whatnot, when parents will need to come into the building. And so we're continuing to just develop our process, solidify our process for those screenings and temperature checks for visitors who need to come into our building as well as some of our contracted service employees. Field trips and who's coming and going, we would eliminate field trips probably for the school year. And illness reporting, we've been working with the Lake County Health Department on kind of guidelines associated with illness reporting, whether it be students or staff, and some of the directions that we need to do in regards to monitoring or quarantining. And we're working closely with them. We still need significant amount of information in regards to this process. They're trying to help schools as much as they can, but it's new to them as well. And so we're just waiting for guidance to help develop some of the guidelines associated with the reporting aspect of this. Face coverings, talked a little bit about earlier, where we've made sure that we're securing face masks for anybody who needs them inside of our building. We would anticipate that everybody would be wearing masks inside of our building, except at lunchtime or when they're playing a musical instrument, and they need to be social distancing at that time. Social distancing, we're pretty good here. Part of our 25% start, if you will, when we get there. We do think that having limited students in the building will help us. No question about it, in our classrooms, if you will. That number of students, a quarter of them, definitely allows them to spread out in there. Our cafeteria, we feel pretty good about that, even though we want to review some serving type guidance that we need, as well as our hallways. We feel okay about that. One thing that we're doing a little more work on, though, is one of the things that we struggle with a lot is being a high school building. Our students do a lot of traveling in between classes and all over the building, really. That's a little bit unique from an elementary building. So we do want to make sure that we're doing a little bit more studying, if you will, on what happens in regards to social distancing and the intermixing of kids. In other words, they're not necessarily in pods. Our students through the building are all over the place, so it's a little bit harder to keep track and trace students where they are. Before and after school, we're almost done with our before and after school format because we revised some times today when we were talking about temperature checks, but we definitely know that we're going to need to start our O'Plain and Allman campuses with students coming in and pretty much going right to first period class. So our bus times and the times that will be open, if you will, are going to be revised to have no students just gathering before the school day. After school, we hope and expect that our students would, after their last period class, just depart and either go home on buses or through their cars or pick up. Student materials, though, that's something that we just want to make sure we continue to emphasize to our kids about, bringing their own materials and not necessarily sharing materials with other in terms of shared objects. Hallway traffic, again, we think that limiting our capacity will help us kind of manage in hallways. We are a little bit worried about it because high school kids tend to gradually attract to each other, if you will, and we're trying to keep them socially distanced. But we do at least feel like we've got a better shot with our plan with reduced numbers. We wouldn't issue kids hallway lockers because obviously that's a point of congregation for students. And for student parking, when we are having students attend, we probably would just have open parking just to see what happens there. It'll also reduce numbers on buses. So we feel good about that at least plan. Tech Campus, we've got a plan with Tech Campus, trying to coordinate with them our schedules and theirs, which is Chris might talk a little bit about later, but we still have a plan to try to have our kids attend Tech Campus as much as possible. Capacity limit is number 4. I think that's limiting to 50 people per room. Obviously, what that means is our cafeterias are our struggle there. In some cases, we had lunch periods with up to like 450 in our 2 cafeterias, so 200 to 225 to 250 on each half, if you will. So we wouldn't, right now we were struggling with getting above 25% just because of cafeterias, but we did want to share that dilemma that we have in regards to that cafeteria space. Events itself, we've, for those of you that don't know, we've canceled our in-person walk-in registration event. We also will not be able to do an in-person type of open house. So we're just going to go remote with a number of things that used to be events, if you will, because of that capacity number. Cleaning and disinfecting is the last group of the health requirements. And so we just wanted to make sure we shared with people that we have done a lot of work in this area in regards to buses being sprayed down after a student sits in seats, classroom teachers spraying down kids after they've used it in a class. We've added custodians during the day to each building and 2 custodians at night to help us with the hot spots, the high contact spots during the day, as well as the more deep cleaning, if you will, every night after school. We're also would have to limit anybody who's not within our school day to have access to our buildings to make sure that we're not, if you will, cleaning nonstop. We also, I mentioned the 2 evening custodians that would help us. And we also did a number of, the buses would be, each night we'd be electrostatically cleaning them with fogging machines. And for sanitation purposes, in terms of the washrooms and washing hands, we replaced all the washroom sinks at Eau Plaine. And we've replaced the electric hand dryers with motion paper towel dispensers to eliminate some of that circulation of air. We've added touchless hand sanitizing stations at all of our major entry points. And we have to make sure we continue to put signage and markings on all of our protocols regarding masks, social distancing, washing hands, cleaning throughout our building. So we feel pretty good about the steps that we've made in terms of increased cleaning. You can move on, Chris. And so what we're going to do now is I think I'm going to turn it over to Gio, who's actually going to talk through each of our individual plans to the extent he can hit some highlights for them. Gio, it's all yours. You're muted, Chris. Chris, you're muted.
Sorry. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about our instructional piece of our return to school plan. There's really 3 parts to it. The first part is the fully in-person learning plan. And obviously this is the strongest way for us to deliver instruction. This is all of our students on campus every day. The schedules and expectations detailed within our 2021 handbook. We would maintain enhanced health requirements in conjunction with return to full-time learning when that time comes. But that is obviously in the future right now. This isn't something that is on our horizon right now. We're really discussing the other options, which are a blended model and a fully remote model. But obviously, this is where we want to be. We want to be seeing our students in the buildings every day, working with our students every day in our school. So our blended learning plan, I'm going to talk a little bit about our schedule for a blended learning plan. It's a mix of blended learning. We're talking about a mix of in-person instruction and online instruction. We'd have 25% of our students in person each day. We would have all students working remotely on Wednesdays. Our hope is we're going to start with 25% of our students, and our hope would be to get that up to 50% if safety regulations allow. Obviously, safety is always first as we're developing these plans. Which is why we're starting with 25% of our students. In this plan, we have flexibility to serve at-risk populations with possibly some additional time on campus for students that might need that additional support. And while we're in this blended learning, we would be doing attendance becomes a part of our record keeping again this year now. Students working remotely would be completing online attendance forms, whereas students that are attending campus would be having attendance taken as normal in the past. So just kind of breaking down the schedule for a second. So Monday, we would bring in the students with last names beginning with A through E at our freshman or at our Eau Plaine and Allman campuses, and students with last names F through Z would be working remotely. On Tuesday, last names that begin with F through L would be on campus. All their students would be remote. You can see here the start times for those in person, where the start times would be the normal bell schedules for people that are in person. Wednesday would be remote. Those are always going to be a late start time. So those late start times that we're familiar with, 9:25 a.m. start for Allman, and Eau Plaine start at 10:25 a.m. Thursdays would be M through R last names would be on campus, and everybody else would be remote. And then Fridays, S through Z, students' last names S through Z would be on campus. If we were able to get to a point where we could have 50% of our students on campus, that would be even better, obviously, because then instead of seeing each student once per week in person, we'd be able to see each student twice per week. We would maintain that Wednesday remote day, so all students would continue that late start remote instruction on Wednesdays. Monday and Thursday, we'd have students with last names A through L on campus, and then last names M through Z would be remote. And on Tuesdays and Fridays, students with last names M through Z would be on campus, and last names A through L would be remote. So we will have a bell. quote unquote bell schedule on Wednesdays to allow for instruction for teachers to interact with students while they are working remotely. So we will have this posted on our website with our plan. But we can see we're following kind of a modified late start schedule. So about 35-minute classes that run throughout the day, 0 through 7 at Allman. And we do have some kids at the Allman campus that take some 8th period courses. And same thing at Eau Plaine, periods 1 through 8, but we do have some Eau Plaine students that take some zero period courses, which is why those times are listed in that fashion there. So under the blended model instructional plan and procedures, the first thing is, as we work through this with our PPAC committee, we've said the whole time we want to protect the health and safety of our students and staff, but it's important to us to provide learning opportunities that focus on critical academic standards. We want to have as much as we can have our kids in our classroom so we can work with them and help them continue with their learning. Social distancing within classrooms as much as possible, as John mentioned earlier. Developing instructional designs to maximize that blend of in-person and remote instruction, whether an ABCD or an AB blended model. Providing timely and meaningful feedback to students through assessments, projects, in-person work, virtual work. Our professional learning teams, our teacher teams, they're going to be working to identify critical skills for the current course. They're going to be identifying critical skills from last spring that might require additional instruction. So really looking at our vertical alignment, making sure that we're not only are we strengthening student skills moving forward, but also working to strengthen the student skills that may be in need from last spring. And we want to support our teachers. We have great teachers. We have great teacher leaders. We have great leaders in this district. So our PLTs are supported directly by their PLT leaders, their department lead teachers, and our assistant principals for student services. They all work very closely together to make sure that they're collaborating, figuring out what's working well, and helping to troubleshoot with one another when we do encounter challenges. For the teachers, their workday in a blended blended model would be a standard contractual workday on those fully remote Wednesdays. They would have 2 hours, 2 hours for PLT meetings, prep time, occasional professional development opportunities, or occasional building meetings. On the Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, they would be working obviously with kids in the building, our standard workday. Grading, grade books, and late work. Last spring, there was the rule from ISB was the do no harm. So the grades were frozen, grades could not go down, they could only go up or stay the same. Those requirements from last spring have been lifted. The graduation requirements that were waived last spring are now back in effect. Things like the SAT, the Constitution test, things of that nature. Students that are currently our seniors, they'll be taking, right now, ISB has scheduled the SAT for our current seniors that missed it last spring to occur in October. We're waiting kind of some more guidance from ISB on to work out some details with that. Our grading practices now follow, once again, our standard grading practices on Board Policy 6280 as outlined in our student parent handbook. Late work, in order to recognize that while we do have students in the building, we still have a primarily remote structure here. So students are still encountering 80% of their instruction remotely. So we still need to make sure that we provide some flexibility so students have time to take care of all of their needs and stay up with their coursework and take care of any other responsibilities that they may have. So we want to provide that flexibility. Students' late work will be accepted for full credit until the end of an instructional unit. Late work turned in after the conclusion of an instructional unit may be accepted per teacher discretion. After that, instructional unit teachers will set their course policies to however they see fit to best serve their students. Students will earn grades based on the work that they submit during the course of the semester. So students will, when they turn in work, it'll be graded. They'll receive feedback. It's important that students stay on top of their coursework as we move through this semester. We do have some dual credit courses that we offer here at Warren in English and Science. Those courses do have some additional grading guidelines that are set forth by College of Lake County that they will also be following, and those teachers will communicate those with those students. In terms of recording grades, it's important for students to get regular feedback on how they're progressing in their learning. And with this mix of in-person and remote instruction, we felt that at least one grade per week in the grade book will help students to know how they're progressing, give them feedback, allow teachers to track students, allow student services to monitor student progression through the curriculum, and allow us to react proactively if we see students disengaging with instruction. And then we can also react and implement additional needed academic supports. So in-person instruction during blended learning, that's going to focus on key skill development. We're really looking at that in-person day as almost like a bonus day to expand on what maybe some things that were delivered through online information, online activities, but really developing those key skills, expanding on what was maybe offered online. Teachers will use a variety of instructional strategies. They'll use activities to facilitate student learning. It might involve some hands-on activities. I know in our PPAC committee, we talked with our science teachers about, how labs fit into that in-person learning day and how that could be used to benefit our students enrolled in those courses. Students who are absent on days when they're scheduled to attend in person will be able to access learning materials on campus. So as we go through blended learning, remote learning, whatever that may be, all of our coursework will be available for students in Canvas. Because we know students may be sick on the day that they may attend, they'll still be able to access that material on Canvas. And if it's something that can't be replicated outside of school, for example, maybe it's a chemistry lab that was done in class, an alternative assignment or a virtual lab would be developed and be provided to students if it's not possible to replicate what was done in class and in a virtual environment. Students who opt to be fully remote while WTHS is following a blended learning model, they will still be responsible for completing the work done in class. It's same for those students. It would be the same as a student that was absent on that day. They would access those learning materials from that day in Canvas and would still be responsible for completing that makeup work. And because that in-person time is so limited and so valuable, our PPAC committee really felt that no assessments will be administered in person that can be completed in an online format. We do not want to spend time having students taking a test when that time in front of our teachers is so valuable to be expanding on learning and strengthening skills. We can find ways to assess our students through our online methods, utilizing video, audio, online assessment tools. There's so many different things that we can do, and our teachers have done a great job of innovating assessment already. So we feel good about that decision. For the students that are interacting remotely during blended learning, they'll access their academic resources through Canvas. They're required to log in to Access daily. They would have to complete the online attendance form daily when they're remote. And then they'll be participating in lessons that may expand upon other activities. It might be presenting new material to prepare for the next time they're coming in for in-person instruction. If they need assistance, they should reach out to their teachers. Teachers will communicate office hours to students to facilitate communication. It will be primarily self-paced except for Wednesdays. And teachers are encouraged to schedule real-time instructional activities with their students on those remote learning on Wednesdays, just to get, the challenge of our blended learning model is that when our students are in the building, 80% of our, or 75% of our students are working self-paced remotely. And because we're blended, it's more of a challenge for us to interact with those students who are working remotely. So that's why communication of office hours are available, need to be communicated so it's students know when they can reach their teachers. And it's also important for us to be reaching out and working with students, or even just being available online in those meeting times on Wednesdays to interact with kids and support them as they move through their learning. And then also those remote instructional lessons will not exceed 30 minutes in length. It's important for us to make sure that we're managing that remote workload so it doesn't become overwhelming for our students. Receiving academic assistance. While on campus, students will receive assistance in similar times, locations, procedures that would have been provided during full in-person learning. So if they're on campus their day on campus, they can access our resource rooms and get additional assistance from resource rooms and teachers. Staff will communicate office hours with students to facilitate assistance when students are remote, and the students working remotely are encouraged to email their teachers to arrange a time to receive assistance. So we're going to continue to develop this part of our plan. We know that that receiving academic assistance, we want to make sure that we're as responsive as we possibly can be. So we're going to continue to fill this out even more and have some more concrete ways for students to receive help as we move into this model. Students with special needs, our special education department is doing an excellent job of developing plans and procedures to address the various unique challenges that this pandemic has created for some of our students with IEPs. We will adhere to timelines for annual IEP meetings and required evaluations. Those timelines for students with all individuals with Disabilities Education Act and 504 timelines are still in effect. We will continue to work closely with families to provide instruction to support their students' IEPs and 504 plans. If they receive accommodations through IEP or 504 and families have questions, please contact the case managers to discuss how your students' needs will be met. That's critically important. We want to make sure that everybody on the student's IEP or 504 team is on the same page. So please contact those case managers so we can continue to work collaboratively. Then we do have a lot of students, emergent bilinguals. That's the term for students who are learning English. We will continue to receive, to administer appropriate services for those students through our sheltered instruction and our bilingual aids and other academic supports. As John mentioned earlier, Tech Campus plans to offer in-person instruction Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, and they'll be on a remote learning schedule on Wednesday. So that actually works very well that our schedules align like that. So our Tech Campus students will be able to attend Tech Campus every day of the week during their assigned times. So so even if a student is a Monday student, an A-day student for us, where they come to attend in person Monday at Warren, they will be able to attend Tech Campus Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday in person. So we're working with our transportation department to develop those plans, to get students to and from Tech Campus on days when they attend Warren physically and also days where they would be considered remote students for Warren. Our daily attendance procedures, students who are working remotely need to complete their online attendance form. That form, just like last year, will be available on the WTHS website and Canvas. We need to have that done by noon each day so we can process our daily attendance. Students who are attending school will have their attendance taken by their teachers as normal. And then if a student needs to be absent, they're out sick, or there's a personal reason for them to be absent, it's the same normal procedures on the Warren attendance line to report the student absence. Technical difficulties with Chromebooks and district software. This is the exact same procedure that we had in place last spring that was worked very well for us. Students complete an online Google form that routes to our technology department, and we get that, when that ticket comes in, we assign that to the technology department member that's going to support that issue. We respond to the family and the student, and we make sure we take care of whatever issue that may be. And since we're blended in this model, they could also come to the Tech Academy room at either campus for assistance on days when they're in person. If a student does not have home internet access, because blended or fully remote, internet access is critical to our plan. We ask that the family, if they do not have home internet access, contact the school to please report the issue so we can work with you. We'll help find solutions to provide the student with the resources they need to complete coursework. It could be helping to try and identify a local internet service provider with a low-cost internet. It could be, might be something where we might need to provide a hotspot. It could be, recommending the use of outdoor Wi-Fi access. We're actually establishing outdoor Wi-Fi access at O'Plain in the north parking lot and the student parking lot at our Allman campus. So we're extending our network out to those parking lots so students, if they don't have internet access at home, can pull up into the parking lot and be able to access the full strength of our network. So I want to transition now into the fully remote learning plan. This would be utilized if we are unable to continue with our blended model based due to directives from the state of Illinois or local health department recommendations. Our goal would be to resume blended instruction as soon as possible. And just to be very clear, this is significantly different from the e-learning plan last spring. I think if you compare instructionally with the blended learning plan, just in terms of direct contact time with our students, I feel that this plan is probably a little bit stronger instructionally than our blended plan, but the blended plan provides a lot more in-person interaction in the school, so there's value to both of them. In the fully remote learning, in a fully remote plan, we would have the opportunity to possibly have maybe a fully remote plus, where we might be able to bring in some of our at-risk students or students that have needs that would be better served on campus. So we would possibly be able to bring those students in to work with them in a different manner than maybe a traditional bell schedule, but more in like pods or groups in this type of a plan as well. So there's some flexibility here to what fully remote means based on the state's recommendations. So our fully remote weekly schedule, all Wednesdays will still continue to follow a late start schedule. Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays are going to follow a block, what we call block schedule. So not all 8 periods will meet on those days. We're going to have half the periods meet one day and half the periods meet the following day. That's a major change from last year, where we had all 8 periods meeting every day. And a lot of the feedback we've received on our surveys that we sent out was that it was just too much. It was too much information. It was too much movement. It was too much coming at them. So we wanted to slow that pace down, provide teachers with additional time to meet with students. So longer periods allows teachers to maybe meet for half the period with half of their kids, work in small groups, instead of meeting for 35 minutes with all of their students all at once. In a fully remote schedule, students would be required to submit attendance and work on coursework daily during this model. The teacher workday would be standard contractual workday on all school days. On Wednesdays, there would be 2 hours for PLT meetings, prep time, professional development, building meetings. On all other days, so Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, teachers will have 1 hour for prep time, professional development, and opportunities, et cetera, before the bell schedule would begin. So right here is what the Almond schedule looks like in the fully remote schedule. So you can see 0 period would start at 8:30 in the morning. Periods are 70 minutes long. One thing we realized as my committee worked on this model, we realized students didn't have a break. So if they had a 4th period lunch, it was potentially they could possibly go through this first day without any break in their instruction. So we inserted a lunch period in on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays for half an hour for lunch. And then at the end of the day, for 35 minutes each day, we have a 35-minute period for students to meet with teachers virtually. If there's additional SEL support that students need, provides an opportunity for our student services department to work with students without pulling them out of other virtual classes. So we're really excited about this idea that came out of our group. This was just a fantastic idea of finding a creative way to find other additional time to work with our students during the school day. On Tuesdays and Fridays, 4-5, periods 4-5, lunch, then 6 and 7. We'd have this additional instruction and SEL support. Now we do have some, like I said, we do have some Almond students that do have an 8th period class. So unfortunately, it's a very small number of students, but unfortunately they would have 8th period during that additional instruction SEL support time, because that 8th period has to align with the O'Plain 8th period. And then Wednesday is the same Wednesday schedule as the blended plan. O'Plain is the same idea. It just starts an hour later. The same thing, O'Plain, that 0 period is similar to the Almond issue we had with the 8th period. There's a little bit of overlap there for 0 period at Almond or at O'Plain. So if we have O'Plain students in a 0 period class, they would just have to leave that class 10 minutes early to be in the 1st period class on time. And otherwise, the schedules mirror each other. They're just an hour later. In addition to the blended plan components, the fully remote plan includes parameters for synchronous instruction. And again, these are terms that are starting to become more and more known, but just to be clear, synchronous instruction refers to when teachers meet virtually with students in real time utilizing Google Meet. And asynchronous instruction refers to when students complete self-paced lessons and assessments that don't require real-time interaction with the teachers. They're working more independently. The grading, grade books, late work, all of those practices and late work policies and procedures are the same as our blended model. There's no difference. During remote learning, all academic resources for remote learning will be posted in Canvas. We are excited about this because it eliminates the need for that daily email that was sent out last year. So there we got some feedback that it kind of blew up kids' mailboxes. It was a little bit overwhelming. Our committee talked at length about what's the best way to deliver lessons. We felt that delivering everything in Canvas with a common structure to that splash page on a Canvas course would be very helpful for students and for parents working with their students to understand where resources we're at within Canvas courses for that students are enrolled in. Students would require to log in to access their lessons on all days. If they need assistance, please reach out to your teachers. Again, just like blended, the teachers will let their office hours be known, in addition to, obviously, that period of time at the end of the day. Remote instruction will incorporate asynchronous and asynchronous instruction. And I know this is one area that we felt that we could really improve upon from last year. We had some teachers do some amazing work with synchronous instruction. We had some fantastic, inventive, innovative asynchronous ideas that were implemented, but really we wanted to get better with how we interact regularly with our students. And we've done extensive professional development this summer. We will continue professional development on our first week back with our teachers. And we are requiring 2 synchronous lessons with our students each week. And when you look at the blended schedule, so if I'm in a first period class, I will be in first period Monday, Thursday, and Wednesday. So out of the 3 periods, 2 of those will be in-person synchronous instruction, or not in-person, but synchronous instruction with the teachers. Asynchronous lessons will be about 30 minutes in length, just like blended, but synchronous lessons may last longer because that is in-person instruction, and those will be scheduled during the times indicated on our plan. All lessons will be focused on reviewing previous skills from last year and addressing key skills. So the same philosophy that we had with blended, we want to continue to move learning forward, but recognize that we need to continue to strengthen skills from last spring. Daily attendance, it works the same, except now that we're remote, everybody's going to be filling in the attendance form online. Technical difficulties will be the same. It's still utilizing that technology help desk ticket system, except now we don't have the on-site with the Tech Academy Plus. So if on-site assistance is required, we will arrange appointments with the family. Our technology department did a fantastic job communicating with families and arranging times to make pickup and drop off of resources seamless for our families last spring. And we'll continue that process again this fall. Home internet access and outdoor Wi-Fi will be the same as with our blended model. Receiving academic assistance, we do have that additional time now for academic and ESDL assistance on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, in addition to encouraging that email communication and providing students with office hours for additional interaction. One thing that we are looking at, I don't have it in here, is we are looking at extending what are called soft phones, so extending teacher extensions to their laptops or smartphones, so they can actually call students and parents from their homes if we are a fully remote model, to make communication even more easy for our teachers, so not relying solely on email or Google Meet to contact students. Students with special needs, it looks exactly the same as with the blended model. Looking at our professional development, our calendar, teacher mentoring, evaluation. John mentioned earlier, August 10th through 14th is our first week back with staff. We have 2 institute staff development days and then 3 remote planning days. Over those 5 days, we'll offer a lot of professional development with staff trainings and orientations about our new structures and safety and health information, enhanced safety health information, as well as professional development focusing on student instruction. And those days will actually be a mix of in-person and remote attendance by our staff as well. Planning for future professional development, we're just we have to hold a little bit and see how the fall starts, and then we'll be working with the district and service committee to plan activities for October, January, and March. Remote learning planning days are given to us by the state. They count as student attendance days, but they are they count student attendance days, but they're meant for teachers to develop and implement lessons for students. We're utilizing 3 of those 5 allocated days on the 12th, 13th, and 14th to help our teachers get ready for the start of the year. Those remaining 2 days we're going to hold on to use at a later date if they are needed. This year, with our, the additional time we have built in for PLTs to meet on Wednesdays, we feel that we can maybe spread those 2 days out and use those if we need to extend out a remote schedule longer than we would need to, longer than is ideal. Students will not receive new assignments on these days. They're working and catching up on work. Obviously not in the 12th, 13th, and 14th, but if we utilize them later in the year, they're just continuing to work on their work. Teachers are working their standard contractual day, and our teachers are developing additional lessons and are responding to student questions. That's kind of the activities that occur on those days as they happen throughout the year. Late start days, all Wednesdays become a late start schedule. However, PLT meetings don't occur on every Wednesday. We have 16 dates identified on our calendar for PLT meetings. Those dates are listed on those charts. So those are the dates when PLTs will meet. On those other Wednesdays, it'll be, as we talked about earlier, just time for teacher planning, might be some professional development, or it might be we might need to have some building meetings just to make sure that we're addressing any questions, or if there's any concerns, when we're working with our staff to all stay on the same page and continue to help one another continue to move forward. Some other standing things that happen over the course of the year: we have weekly lead teacher meetings, monthly PLT leader meetings. Those will still occur, whether they're virtual, whether they're in person. If they're in person, social distancing guidelines will obviously be followed. But those meetings are critical to us as we work together as an instructional team to help support our teachers, support our instructional leaders, and make sure that we're all working together and learning from one another and our successes and supporting each other as we encounter new challenges. We have a new teacher mentoring program that will continue to run. That we will support our new teachers that are coming into the district so they're ready on day one to utilize all the available resources while instructing their students. We want to make sure they're up and ready to go from the very beginning. And our PLTs do an amazing job of getting our new teachers ready to go with the curriculum and with all the resources that our PLTs use from the time they come to us. Our new teachers come to us that first week of August to when they'll see their kids that week of August 17th. Certified and classified staff evaluations. Decisions regarding those evaluations, if we are in a period of remote learning, we will work with our WTHS parent committee to make any decisions about how those evaluations will take place. I'm going to turn it back over to John to take these next couple of slides. Thank you.
Great job, Chris.
John, you're muted.
Thank you very much. We've been trying to update a little bit just in regards to people have interest and ask us all the time what's going on with athletics. So we've just been kind of waiting for the IHSA or ISB or the Illinois Department of Public Health to give guidance on what's happening in the fall. We're still waiting on whether or not there will be any kind of athletics in the fall. So that's just something that we've just kind of been working through accordingly, hoping that we would have gotten guidance by now or direction, but we do not. So that's just something that we might circle back to. What next, Gio? Thank you. We did want to make sure that we put in our plan just a little bit, in our return to school plan, just a little bit of our communication tools. So obviously we send out email notifications to our parents and students weekly. We're also making sure that obviously when there's urgent things, we send them text messages or calls. Most of the time during the summer, though, we just send letters. Different than like a snow day is a case where it's an urgent situation, right? Because it's upon us, and that's one where we make calls and texts. Our website, we try to keep updated. We've got our monthly newsletter, The Warren Connection, which we put out, and then we're trying to be as active as we can on our Facebook page. In addition to that, there's one thing that we helps is we're going to make sure that as we continue to move forward through the school year, that whatever the changes are in regards to health requirements or in regards to expectations for students, staff, or visitors, that we have enough signs and messages around the school and on school buses, as well as just make sure that whatever the messages are, that we continue to ask parents and students to support us in any efforts to reinforce the enhanced health requirements. And so that's pretty much coming to the end of our formal plans, if you will. If you notice, board, I just wanted to remind you that within our two plans that Chris presented, we actually for tonight wanted to make sure that the board was aware of our full blended plan and our fully remote plan, if you will, meaning not just pieces of them, but last year, if you remember, when we went to a remote status, we had to kind of get a makeshift plan, if you will, everybody on the fly trying to build a remote plan. We wanted to make sure that we brought back to the board what we're pretty proud of is obviously a much more robust fully remote plan with the block schedule and professional development and much more opportunities for synchronous learning. So we're really proud of our fully remote plan. And then also just our blended plan, which to a degree for us, we were intending to utilize at a time when we're ready to come back to school. I'm hopeful that in the earlier part of the presentation, you can flip that, Chris, next slide. But earlier part of the presentation, we were talking through some of the things about, just our readiness to return kind of. And so we were just trying to put through some of the reasons why we would be fully remote. Some of these, unfortunately, we experienced last year in terms of, the governor's order or a director from the Illinois State Board of Education. They could do that, meaning that they have in the past, and obviously they could at some point in time in the future. But there's other things that we always take into consideration. Guidance to schools from the health department about what's going on in this area in the Illinois Department of Public Health. Even if it doesn't come from the state board, just being aware of the COVID cases and being aware of what's going on around us, and always trying to keep sense of that. There's other things though that kind of, even as recently as this morning, our administrative team meets every Tuesday to say, okay, where are we in regards to a return to school? Are we ready right now to bring students back in? Right now, my recommendation to the board is that not quite ready. Because if you notice in some of the things we talked about early on, we're almost there. We've done great work. But and I want to thank, by the way, everybody who's worked on all these plans to try to make sure that we're ready as soon as we can to get kids back in. But there's still some things that, we're still working on in regards to the enhanced health requirements. I just want to talk through just a little bit of some of those in regards to the self-certification piece and temperature checks that we have a lot of it done, but if you ask me right now whether or not we can bring students back into that, we're not ready for that piece of it just quite yet. The other thing that concerns me quite a bit, obviously, is because we're high school. I tried to mention a little bit earlier about high schools don't have the luxury of being able to pod their kids, if you will, or keep them together all day and manage traffic in and out, which, obviously managing traffic in and out is a kind of a key, it's a key piece of trying to stop a spread. So that piece about our high school kids just circulating as much as they do, right, is what it is. But, we're not right now. I don't know if we have absolutely all the sense on the information that we need to be able to manage those potentially with the Lake County Health Department. So we're continuing to work with those, but it is a serious concern of ours when we talk about, are we ready to open, as of August the 17th. We also, just a couple other things that are realities for us. We do try to work with our sender districts very closely in just regards to schedules. And so we always think about them. We try to communicate with them just to make sure we always keep in mind what happens when especially, for example, if they're not in and we are, and all those kinds of things that cause issues for our families and challenges for families. And also that things that are probably affecting people like they do on things like snow days is there's staffing difficulties for all of us when there's, certain schools around Lake County schools that start to go remote and or blended. There's kids at home in all of our districts, and we share, a lot of people, if you will. It does start to add to staffing difficulties for the schools. My reason for bringing this out is really just to kind of end with, I was, even up as to last week, we were kind of like, boy, we're going to try to get kids in on August 17th if we can, or August 18th, I guess it would be. But at this point in time, what I want the board to consider is whether or not we can at least till October 1st try to, we're actually proud of our fully remote plan as well. So we're kind of thinking about, we would like to try to use our fully remote plan for 6 weeks. And obviously what that'll allow us to do is tighten up on a few of those loose ends and work with the health department on some of those managing potential cases work, tighten up on our self-certification screening and temperature process, and hopefully make sure that the next time that we meet approaching October 1st, we'd be able to say, no, we're 100% good to go, and we feel completely good about every aspect of this plan. So that's kind of my recommendation to the board, is just that we would start the year, although the board's task tonight is really to approve our fully remote and blended plans. I do want to let you know that in terms of where we're at as a readiness, we'd like to kind of just be thinking about going fully remote until October 1st. And hopefully by then we can get into the blended plan. Our blended plan we designed it originally to be our transition back to in-person instruction, meaning with the limited number of people. So, we would still, if we got back to the point of October 1st and we've got all of our questions answered, we would still utilize our ABCD blended plan to bring students back in. So I think we've gone through all of our formal slides. I did want to just touch on, one other piece that Gio talked on, just had to do with in the interim. We've been interested all along in making sure that some of our students that maybe most, we had mentioned early on that some of our students that are most in need may need to be reached out to and be talked about. Hey, we can do some other things with smaller groups of students to give them the supports they need. So I just want to make sure I circle back to that, because that's kind of an add-on to the fully remote plan, if you will, that we would also start to work potentially with smaller groups of students who are either the blended learning plan, or I'm sorry, the remote learning plan may not be working for. So there was a lot of information, everyone. Thanks for your patience. Just wanted to make sure that we kind of gone through that. Gio, I think that's the last slide. You can probably stop sharing if the board wants to ask any clarifying questions.
Dr. Algren, this is Paul Schultz. I have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
First one, the hybrid ABCD plan. We talked about percentages of kids that might be in a class or a bus or a lunchroom. Could you give us an idea, just with the ABCD plan, roughly how many kids would be on a bus? How many kids would be in a class? How many kids would be in the cafeteria?
Sure. And knowing that we'd also, the one thing I wanted to mention about all of our plans that I forgot to bring out, Paul, but one of the things that we were really proud of is, people were asking, we did get a number of inquiries about, what if my student's not, I don't really want them to return yet. And even with our blended model, it's designed as such that if students decide to stay at home and work remotely, they would still stay in their normal coursework. They would still advance through our program without necessarily changing their classes, changing their programs, either to go in or out. But to answer your question, so one of the things we really liked about our blended model and hope to roll it out as soon as we can is, classrooms that normally would have, 24 to 28 students right on a given day, that teacher would be seeing 6 to 7 students in a classroom, making sure they can socially distance them, making sure that the kids feel safe, and also allowing our teachers to kind of get used to that kind of, let's see, after I've used 6 or 7 desks, just making sure we spray down desks right away. In our cafeterias, we normally, like I said, probably have 200 kids in any one of 4 big spaces, if you will. And so those would have to be cut down to 50 or below, because that's the rule. That's a big challenge for us, right? So that's, another kind of big issue for us, or can be. And so that's, again, 50 is a lot more reasonable. And we're able to make sure in lunch, they do have to be socially distanced, because that is a time when they're allowed to take off masks. And so they would have to be socially distanced, facing the same direction. There's some other best practice guidance that we would be able to set up within our cafeteria. On our buses, generally speaking, let's say there's 30 to 36 students maybe coming in on different routes, and those our capacity or our actual bus ridership varies greatly. But taking a quarter of those students, you're talking about 9 to 10 students on a bus, and bus drivers would probably be able to clean those seats right afterwards and manage where students sit, making sure that they're in the most safe possible. Our hallways, generally, if you think about, let's say 6 or 7 classrooms in a hallway area that share a general hall, you might be talking about somewhere between, let's say 160 students or so that are kind of in a hallway period that are moving now. And so a quarter of those might be about 40 kids now that we'd be able to direct traffic as and remind them to stay socially distant, and, but much more manageable in regards to the general congregation that happens in hallway areas and whatnot. So those were the kinds of numbers we're thinking about using when we get to the point of using our our blended ABCD plan. The downside, we also know though, like in terms of instructionally, our fully remote plan has there's much more opportunity for periods of time. There's much more opportunity for content to be shared in our fully remote plan in a very powerful way. That we also know one of the downsides of our ABCD blended plan was that we didn't intend it to be forever for really long periods of time, because it's still students are only coming in 1 day a week, and then you've got a number 80, all the other kids are at home working remotely. It's just a little bit, our plan of it is just for the ABCD specifically was really just let's try to get people back in the building and make sure that our safety enhancements were working.
Another question I had is, you're suggesting that we do fully remote until October 1st. What kind of period before that or advance notice would we give teachers and parents to say, as of 10/1, we're doing this or that, just so people have time to react and plan accordingly?
Yeah, so we've been trying to give people, like we are now, we've been trying to give people, our rationale for this meeting or this time frame as a deadline kind of was about at least probably 3 weeks of time that we'd want to kind of tell people what was going on there. So 3 weeks prior to October 1st, hopefully we'd start to, maybe 2 weeks at the latest, we'd start to have an idea of where we were going to transition to, right? So I would, 2 weeks prior, probably mid-September, we would probably be looking at what's going on. Do we have all of our, are we 100% comfortable with our health enhancements that we're ready to bring students back in? So that would be our time frame.
Okay. And during the presentation, and just now you mentioned that, our illness reporting and guidelines still have a lot of work. There's still a lot of unknown of what we would do in certain scenarios, as far as when a student got sick, when a teacher got sick, a bus driver got sick, or contact tracing, anything like that. We mentioned that we don't have any guidelines from the Department of Health, and we're waiting on potential guidelines from the Department of Health. I would just suggest that at the same time, in parallel, we get a group of people together and develop our own guidelines. I'm thinking between the board, the staff, the community, we could come up with some really good guidelines, because I'd hate to keep waiting for the Department of Health to come up with some guidelines, and then they never come up with anything.
Yeah, it's a good point. And we may, there may be, we'll start to see if people who are, people are, I'm sure, are doing that, Paul. So, and they've given us obviously some standard answers that you can probably get, from the CDC in general. But, it's a little bit more serious than that, because we're talking about high school kids who are moving all in and out of classrooms all day, passing a lot of people. And so it's a little bit trickier in regards to just, managing that situation. And we also could look on our end internally about, are there ways we can, even inside of our building, thinking creatively about some degree of potting or some degree of not letting it be all, all classrooms. But it is very difficult for us because of the vast number of classrooms that we have, that we need in both of our campuses.
Absolutely. And I'd be very curious what some of the other schools out there have announced coming back in a hybrid method, what their illness reporting plans are, and maybe we can learn from them as well.
You bet. Good point.
So we absolutely, before we could even consider coming back to school, have a way to track people if they've been sick. And what happens to everybody that's in their class? What happens to all the teachers they've been in contact with? Are we going to test them? Do they have to go get tests? I mean, there's so many unanswered questions in that section that have to be answered to me before we could even remotely consider going to the hybrid model. And even at that, I'm not sure that it's safe. I mean, every time you get kids together, they start transferring the virus. I mean, I haven't seen the camps that have been going on, everything has been going on. They've been transferring the virus back and forth between each other. So I'm all for not starting, I think October 1st is very optimistic that we would have a plan that addresses all these issues by October 1st, particularly if we're going to wait for the state to give us guidelines that are going to work specifically for our facility. I think that's very difficult to expect, along with what Paul said. If we're going to wait for them, we might as well go for the whole first semester now and just be done with it.
Mr. Anderson, this is Pauling. I agree with your thoughts completely, because as anxious I am for students and teachers to return to school, even on just, a 1 day a week basis, I mean, the health and the safety of everybody's has to come first.
And just to add on to that, this is Bency. I was just kind of looking at and listening to the tech campus, agenda, and I guess I'm a little confused because it seems like they're going to be face-to-face and business as usual going to the campus with face-to-face instruction every day aside from Wednesday. So is it because it's a lower number of students that's going to tech campus? And what if there are students that, due to health concerns or whatever the concern may be, they don't want to, we would prefer to be remote. Are we going to offer remote learning to the tech campus as well?
So part of that is there are pieces to one advantage that the tech campus, and the tech campus is dealing with the same type of hard questions that all the high school districts, in Lake County that serve the tech campus are. So they're going through their same process of reviewing, all of their health requirements and how they interface with our schools. One advantage they have, I guess, Bency, is, that their kids, our kids who go there are pretty much, they go there for one program. So there's a little bit, I guess, there's a containment once the kids get there while they're there. But yeah, it still is. It was an issue for them last year as well, too, though, and just dealing with the coronavirus, because they've got kids, right, coming from all the different schools, right? And so there's obviously a concern then for them that they share, right, that our students from all of our buildings are there together. And there's a cross kind of, if you will, there's the crossing of bodies just from different schools. So there's no question that there is a concern. There's no question. It's a great question, and they're battling with it too, obviously.
So this is Tom Drake. I got a question for Chris. I think what I heard you say earlier, Chris, is that the fully remote model actually created an atmosphere where there would be the most time, albeit remote, there would be the most time between teachers and students via a remote model. Is that correct? Did I remember that correctly?
That's correct, because when you're in a blended model, you see your kids in front of you. You're only seeing 25% of your kids, and you're not able to support. So you have 75% of, if you keep it in context of your first period class, you have 25% of your first period class that you are working with at that moment. But 75% of your first period class, you're not able to interact with in that moment. You have to try and get to them in your prep periods, before school, after school, office hours, those sorts of things. It's challenging, and our committee discussed that's a major hurdle in that blended model. In the fully remote model, we are requiring 2 days or 2 lessons of in-person instruction every week. So that's a 70. You could be meeting on that 70-minute period, and in that 70-minute period, you might be able to work in small groups with your class. You might work with a full group for 70 minutes, and then you could do that again like Mondays and Thursdays. So you have more access to kids, and then maybe you're using that Wednesday to support students, just like drop in, come talk, like ask questions, that sort of thing. So we felt that fully remote model really opens up, albeit virtually, a lot better support for students through synchronous instruction, but also giving teachers some flexibility with that time at the end of the day too, to meet with kids and support kids that are learning virtually.
Okay, so that answers that question. And then I guess the comment, as I listened to you guys go through this, I think my opinion changed a little bit. I like the idea of somehow creating an opportunity for the kids and the teachers to be face-to-face. But I do think it just has the potential to get confusing. Who's there on what day? I mean, I like to think I manage my calendar pretty well, but I do think if we have a model that is the same for everybody every day, a remote model, and it presents an opportunity to actually, albeit remote or virtual, spend more time between teacher and student, it seems like that would be the better way to start to me. Not that we couldn't get to a blended model, but and make that work. But it seems like it's the safest, one, which is the primary concern, and two, it actually increases the amount of instruction time. Let me, part B of that question or comment, because I think I was going to ask this, but I think you just said it, Chris. Could there also be a part of this fully remote model where a student could come and see a teacher in a very controlled environment if needed? It sounds like they could do that virtually, but could there be an opportunity? You know, we have a lot of sessions where we give kids instruction when they have specific questions and they just need to kind of talk to the teacher. Have you guys considered that opportunity maybe?
We've talked about, the possibility of like virtual resource rooms and things of that nature. If we're fully remote, we still have to make sure that we're keeping the buildings safe. So if we're going to bring students in, it would really need to be students that are really in need of additional academic support. But we would be working to identify those students. We would have to work through what that would look like. I don't know if it's as easy as saying the student needs extra time with a teacher coming into the building for that. But we want to try and get as creative as we can be in finding multiple avenues for providing students academic assistance. So what I presented tonight, to me, is just scratching the surface of when we finally are ready to go in August, what we'll be able to offer for additional academic assistance. I do not feel that is a complete list of what we'll be able to offer for our students.
Okay, thank you.
And this is Sharnita. As far as food, are we still planning then to continue the same type of food delivery services that were provided or handout services?
Yeah, I'll jump in, Janita. Yeah, I think we'll be able to do that. We'll check with Mike and Quest. They've been pretty accommodating to try to come up with some process. We probably would modify it a little bit from last year, but we definitely can get back to that process. We have to check in with ISB. I don't know if they've given any guidance out. Probably not yet. It's one of those things that comes as a thought. I haven't seen that question pop up to ISB yet. And that would be a question whether people are actually fully remote or even hybrid, because even in those hybrid situations, there's days probably when kids are home all through the state. So it's a very good question. I haven't seen it addressed yet to the state, but we'll start looking into that type of support.
Can we broach the subject of athletics and camp, please?
Sure.
I'm not comfortable personally waiting until next week to get any directive from the state insofar as I don't know how many camps are going on right now, but it seems like that there'd be way too much contact between students that for my liking without it being addressed tonight.
Other board members?
I feel somewhat the same way. I mean, I don't see, if we're fully remote, I don't see how we're doing athletics anyway. If it's not safe to bring kids into the classroom, then it's not safe to have them doing something else. We have the same problems no matter which way you're going. I just don't see how the two coexist. Athletics and fully remote learning. It didn't in the spring, so I don't see how it wouldn't. We've already said we're not going to go until October 1st. So at the earliest, and I think that's a pipe dream to begin with. So I don't see why the risk is worthwhile if we're not going to have athletics anyway. Now, obviously the state hasn't made that decision. I don't know how, the other 5 board members feel, but I think that, it's just my feelings. So.
I'll chime in, John. This is Tom. I'm completely aligned with your comments and Jim's comments. Even if we thought we could put a list of actions in place to make some sort of a blended model acceptable from a risk standpoint, and I'm not saying we've got that yet, but let's say we could. I don't know how you play football or any contact sport, at least.
100% agree.
What could you possibly do to mitigate any risk. And in fact, I think by conducting those activities, you would undermine all of the actions you took on the academic side, because you'd be bringing those kids into the classroom if we were in a blended model. So I'm with you. I mean, if we're to the point of not being satisfied that we can bring kids into the classroom and control this, I don't know how we can bring any kids in any close environment and make it safe for everybody. I'm there. I don't think we should be conducting any sports camps or anything that brings kids together.
What are the safety guidelines for sports camps right now?
So, Pat, are you on? I can handle it.
Yeah, yes.
Can you jump in with how they're operating right now in terms of the health, the increased health requirements for athletic camps?
Sure. Every kid goes through a certification process when they showed up. We created a Google form that the coaches would access electronically each day. Each student who's attending a camp would be asked the certification questions that were approved by the Illinois Department of Health. In addition to, they had their temperature taken, and that was documented. So all kids were tracked and could be traced because we have it documented who showed up, who was there at what time with what coaches. Students are also outside for the most part. There is some inside in the weight room. Weight room was allowed in the guides given us by IDPH and the IHSA. Other than that, the camps had been outside, with the exception of swimming that did start this week. And there are different precautions for them. When they're inside, obviously they're wearing masks unless they're in the pool. And when they're outside, they are allowed to take their masks off as long as they are socially distant. Our coaches aren't really doing, they're not doing scrimmages, they're not doing contact. So as far as keeping kids separate or socially distanced, it isn't as difficult. If you think of a normal camp, maybe they're for football, let's say they're doing 7-on-7 or some type of scrimmage or contest, they're not doing that during their camps. So that's why that's how coaches have kept student athletes safe. We have not had one incident, with the exception of one student was turned away one day. We have not had any other incidents, nor was that student tested positive or anything like that. The student was turned away on the first day. So we have had no incidents like maybe you've read at some other schools.
Well, no, if they have not been tested, you don't know if you've not had an incident. That's the thing. Kids are asymptomatic a lot of the time. So at Lake Zurich, they didn't find out till they had 80 kids or 70 kids or whatever the number was. But,
Fair enough. And what about, Pat, can you just review what's going on with band as well?
Band they've only doing with two sections, the color guard and the drum line. And same thing, they're following the same protocols as what the athletic camps are following. We're only allowing fall athletic camps as we thought that season, if there was going to be a season, that was the most eminent season. We did not allow winter or spring sports to have camps because we just weren't sure if there was going to be a season for them, and certainly it wasn't eminent like the fall season was.
And then, Dr. Keeley, when were the camps scheduled to end?
I'd have to look at the calendar, but I believe this week, most of them are wrapping up. Volleyball maybe was doing next week. Again, if I needed to have the calendar in front of me, but I believe just volleyball is hanging out after this week.
and then they start practice right away too then.
There's no deads. They eliminated the dead week, so they could just keep going into the season. In years past, the first week of August was kind of a dead week. We couldn't have any athletics, and then there would be a start date. That has not happened this year. But again, as of now, next week is the last week of anything scheduled for athletics. I'm not aware of anything beyond next week scheduled, as we're waiting to hear about seasons.
Does the board, any differing opinion, is anybody differing from the board's opinion thus far, just vocally? Because we hadn't made the decision on what we were doing with school necessarily until we had this discussion tonight regarding our remote planning. I guess what we could do is, if indeed it turns out that sometime, and I guess too, the fact that if we do have a fully remote start, that kind of, I would imagine also would have an impact not only on potentially athletics, but also band, Pat. So appreciate the board's concerned about bringing people together. We can probably start to just wrap those up with the exception of if we do hear, because we just don't know. The only reason we kind of want to make sure that what we didn't do is all of a sudden we weren't letting for as an example, we weren't letting the swimmers swim, and then all of a sudden a swim season falls on us, right? And our swimmers haven't been in a pool in a while, things like that. So we did want to make sure on our end that that we were at least addressing the potential conditioning levels, if you will, if there was a season. We don't know there's going to be a season though. So, and we haven't, I want to make sure the board's comfortable with what we're doing. And, if we need to shut down camps to make the board comfortable and us comfortable in regards to where kids are at, we're good with that too, because it is our most pressing issue is to make sure that we're looking out for the obviously the wellness of our community.
So this is Jonita. I have so I obviously have a child who is one of those camps, and I've been very comfortable with the way that the camp has been ran. Now, if the camps are ending after this week, right, which is what, this is Tuesday, 3 more days left in the week. I don't see why we wouldn't allow them to finish out the next 3 days. And then, the other piece of it is if the camp does end in 3 days, which I'm assuming, then it's all fine. But parents did pay a fee to participate in those camps. And so that would be something else that we would need to then consider if the parents don't feel like they've received their full benefit for what they paid.
Yeah. How do other board members feel about letting the camps run to the end of this week and then saying after the end of this week, no more organized sports of any type until further review by the board or IHSA guidelines come out?
I'm good.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
I agree with and mostly agree with the IHSA guidelines. I think we can all have opinions, but when these governing organizations or IDPH or ISB or somebody gives out guidance in regards to health and safety, I feel that holds a lot more weight than how we feel one way or another. The only thing that I don't feel like ongoing, if we don't feel comfortable with kids in schools, it's very difficult for me to come to terms with allowing kids to come and play sports. On the other hand, sometimes sports are the hook that keep kids interested. Kids that are relying on competition for scholarships. We have kids for various reasons that may not be obvious to us at the moment, where this is more than just participating in a sport. It could mean something more. It could gain them something more, access, scholarships, those kinds of things. So I just want to be sensitive as we make those decisions in that regard. But that being said, I'm very torn on this one because I like the other side of me. So yes, on one hand, as the school district, we need to do what's best in terms for our kids and our community, and again, follow the guidance. However, back to the other side, many of our kids will just find the nearest club to play in, will cross the border, play against each other, have tournaments without us. And we all know that. And some of those clubs are already starting to form their own tournaments in absence of any kind of formal sports. So I also just want to be realistic in the sense that it's not as if our kids will stop playing sports. It'll just, in some cases, with us guiding it, monitoring it, it may even be safer if we have controls in place around it. But I'm very torn with this one. But certainly, as we think about this remote learning decision, for me and where I stand, it's very hard for me to come to terms with having kids play when we won't allow them on site for academics. So that part I'm struggling with it, despite all the other kind of sides to the argument. So I just wanted to share my opinion on the subject.
Yeah. Thanks, appreciate it, Tony. Tony, I kind of feel the same way. I mean, all four of my kids played sports through high school, some on into college, and there's much more to it other than winning or losing a game. There's so many lessons that are learned on the field, and it opens up so many doors to them. I appreciate the guidelines that are on right now for the camps going on, but I've never seen the camps going on right now, so I can't really judge how safe are they being run. So you know what? I trust the coaches and the staff that are running them right now to make them as safe as possible. At some point, we have to trust these people. That being said, if if the camps pretty much end at the end of this week, I'm okay letting them run to the end of this week and saying no more after that, and let's wait for next Wednesday and see what the state comes out with.
I don't have the calendar in front of me, so I can't guarantee. I think there are still some other camps hanging out there. I would have to refer to a calendar. So
Okay.
I don't want to say every single camp ends by this week.
So how does the board feel about letting camps run until they're done then? It's a different question saying just a couple more days this week versus a couple more weeks. And especially, is it a couple more weeks for non-contact cross-country, or is it a couple more weeks of a contact volleyball or football?
So this is Jonita. Again, being a parent whose child is participating, I feel 100% comfortable with what we've experienced so far with the way that our coaches have been facilitating these sessions. So I, as a parent, would feel comfortable allowing my child to continue through the camp.
So there still is going to be a demarcation point between the end of the camp and the beginning of practice.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Which would be next week or the end of next week or whatever it is. So we can say until we get IHA, I guess I would be comfortable saying finish the camp, but there's no transition to practice, until we have IHSA guidelines or we decide what we're going to do or whatever. That takes it out to the point of people getting what they paid for without having to try to figure out how to pay them back. And I'm sure they're being run very, very well. I'm not casting aspersions on the coaches or our process or anything else. It just seems like those little viruses get underneath the fence. I don't know how they do that. They get under the fence.
Yeah.
So
And we should have some guidance from IHSA here soon, because I think I just thought they had some communication out earlier today that they're going to be meeting with
next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday, yeah.
I don't remember the dates.
Yeah, we had. Yeah, in terms of athletic, and now maybe band is a different issue too, just because if we're fully remote, that may just be a different conversation that we want to have with the band directors, if you will. But our conversation all along has been in regards to Pat and I, is if and when the IHSA says there's no season in a particular sport, we were going to say then there's no camp then. We haven't been able, because we were bringing people together, only the fall sports that may be participating from a conditioning piece. But I appreciate your letting us at least investigate when those camps are supposed to have a natural closure. If it looks like they're drawn out longer than a natural closure relatively soon, we'll have different conversations with those programs possibly. Sound okay?
Yeah, one more question. What did Stevenson has gone remote, right? For the first semester. Are they having athletics?
Yes, and they have not canceled sports for the fall.
Okay. Just good information. Thank you.
Something else to keep in mind what other states are doing.
No fans in the stands?
What's that?
Are they going to conduct a football game with no fans in the stands?
Yeah, everybody's doubtful. I think what people are thinking is, I think everybody's doubtful, kind of, if you will, that there's going to be seasons, right? But we didn't know, there are a number of fall sports that are playing under guidelines of the IDPH that seem to be good for people, right? Golf, tennis, maybe cross country in a way, swimming, maybe. So I think what they're trying to do is not necessarily say, oh, all sports are gone and bad kind of a deal, just, till they evaluate. Or they're going to say no sports or push them off. They could do a variety of things. So I don't think anybody's said yet we're canceling sports, because I don't know yet whether they've been given an opportunity to evaluate what the sports are available for kids.
Okay.
And Dr. Algrim, you touched on a topic I was going to mention too, is we got to keep in mind, nothing to act on, but keep in mind other states that have deferred fall sports a month or two, or doubling it up in the springtime. So there's all sorts of other scenarios to think about.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Can I just say this, please, for the record? That I believe that camps should be stopped now.
Yes, duly noted.
I agree.
Who said I agree? I missed that.
It's this number right here, 847 something.
Yeah, I don't think it was a board member.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. It's hard to keep track. There's a lot of squares.
Goes good with my square head. I'm okay with the camps going on until their end, and
Yeah, we'll look to when they're supposed to end.
we'll get guidance hopefully from, and we just,
And keep in mind, topics like sports is one of the reasons why we have so many dates we've asked the board to keep open. So as we get more information, we've already got dates set up to have further conversations.
Understood.
On a very timely basis.
Thanks, Paul.
So if we're gonna go ahead, Paul. I'm sorry.
Yep. Go ahead, John.
Nope. You go right ahead. Lead away.
No, I was gonna say I'm just gonna rehash one more time that we're in sync. We're gonna let camps run into fruition, but no formal sports training after the camps run out until we decide as a board or we get further guidance from the IHSA.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I think the best way to treat it is in the absence of new guidance, you treat it under what we've previously gone under, which unless we've gotten something from an authority that says otherwise, we continue until we do so, which I keep hearing should be soon. And I think you guys referenced their meeting next week.
Yeah. Mr. Anderson, did you have something else you were going to add?
No, I was gonna start talking about the motion to approve the plan. So, but
Okay.
I figured out that's not my spot. So
It's very fine. Is there, from the board, is there any more conversation on the return to school plan, sports, or any other topic on that?
Yeah, I'd like to say this. I've been involved in the conversations the last couple months, and I think that the parents of the students of Warren Township High School should know that everybody has the kids' best intentions, best interest at heart, and I can be more proud to be a board member of this school district.
thanks, Jim.
Will there be time for questions?
Not now.
Hold on for reception of visitors. There'll be a chance to address the board. So,
Paul,
So- Absolutely.
Can I ask a question? What we're being asked to approve tonight are both plans, right? Not necessarily being asked which one to implement this fall?
Correct. My understanding is we're being asked to approve all these plans and also be cognizant of the fact that they're going to be modified on an ongoing basis. We talked a lot about needing to learn a lot more about, health checks, temperature checks. What do we do in these scenarios? Those are all going to be things that we need to work on.
Okay. Thanks.
Dr. Algrim, is that correct? Would you agree with that summary?
That's very correct. And it also got, we did get clarification tonight on, just in addition to approving those two plans, that we will stay on a fully remote plan until at least October 1st and evaluate as we get closer to that date on what happens after that.
Okay. Now, last question for you, Dr. Algrim, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that are participating on this right now are probably thinking the same thing. At a board meeting, we're going to have the reception of the visitors come up, and it's to remind people that it's your chance to address the board, but it's not a chance to have a dialogue with the board or assume that your questions are going to get answered. I'm not discouraging people from addressing the board. I mean to encourage them. The more input we get, the better. But Dr. Algrim, is there a possibility at some point to have, like, I don't want to call it an open town forum or something like that, where parents can actually have a dialogue with the staff and ask questions and get them answered, because I don't want people to feel frustrated that I have all these questions, I don't know how to get them answered.
Yeah, if there's, so we've scheduled, we didn't know, Chris, for staff anyway, in regards to our staff, first I'll answer that. We will make sure that we were scheduling some listening sessions, if you will, or Q&A sessions regarding our plans. One of, now it'll change a little bit in regards to, at least initially, making sure that we're ready to implement a fully remote plan. So that's something that may be most useful for our staff in regards to that plan itself. The other thing that we could do probably is we could number one, start to develop a frequently asked Q&A kind of document of just what some of the things that come out of this. I think a lot of times those are easy for the public to read. And so as they start to generate questions, we can absolutely put those on there. Yeah, I'm more than open to if I'll try to work with Gio on whether or not there's a way that we can just kind of host a Q&A kind of deal with generally like we are now, right? But as questions, just to present the plan again and open it up to the public, rather than some of our staff may have more specific questions about our fully remote plan.
Right. I think doing both would be great. If we could have a frequently asked questions online for parents to go to, and then have a chance for them to talk directly with people, I think that'd be great. The more that we communicate the details on whatever plan we have, the better.
Yeah, thank you. And we also, so the good thing is one of the things that we were trying to do is we've been telling our community that we would at least, I know people wanted, they want to know what we're doing, right? That's a lot of what we've been trying to work with people on. And we want to make sure we give people information as in timely manner as we can. So starting tomorrow, what we'll do is we'll at least communicate to our parents, or on Thursday rather, we'll communicate out to our parents what our plan is in regards to our first implementation with our fully remote plan, at least through October 1st. The other thing we have to know that we've been planning accordingly, because we've said all along we might be fully remote at any time. So part of that was also thinking about things like Chromebook distribution for our freshmen, a few other processes that go into place now that we know that we're going to need to be fully remote.
Plus, getting input from the parents would be important too, because they know firsthand how it worked in the spring. Granted, that was under a very different situation, but we could probably learn a lot from what worked and didn't work from their perspective.
Yeah, it sounds. Hey, Chris, will you remind us of the survey that we put out? Are you still there, Gio?
Yeah. So the surveys that we sent out earlier this year.
Yeah, when we were trying to get a feel for, remember how we were getting a perspective on the last year, our remote learning, if you will, just
right.
Ways of improving.
So when we sent the survey out, we got a mix of responses, and it seemed like we had some inconsistency in how instruction was delivered, with some teachers meeting more than others, some families feeling that there was plenty of the right amount of work, some families feeling there was too much work, some families feeling there wasn't enough work. So we really talked through those results to see, well, how could we put some systems in place to make sure that we were having some consistency across all classes, all sections, and really focusing on the on more interpersonal interactions. I think another piece of that was a challenge for us in the spring was just some of the rules set forth by ISB, where there wasn't a lot of incentive either for kids to stay engaged. We did our best to keep kids engaged in this, and we also obviously this was new for all of us in education, and we were doing our best to get to learn on the fly and improve what we were doing, and just trying to work through all that together. And I think our PPAC committee did a good job of analyzing those survey results, taking the feedback, reflecting on their own experiences and the experiences of their colleagues in those staff surveys to really put together a plan that we felt would be supporting our students far better than we did last year. And I know our instructional services team, our instructional coaches, our assistant principals did a great job of putting together a summer professional development program that went all summer long, weekly. Every week we had 75 to 100 teachers in those meetings working on different professional development activities. So it was a fantastic effort by our entire staff to continue to learn in the summer months, so we can continue to get and improve in how we serve our students next year.
But to your request, Paul, next week maybe we'll try to set up a community kind of listening session as well, and maybe start with some of what Gio just talked about, just to refresh about what they had given us, what we tried to do with it, and where we're going, at least for the next 2 months.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you. Any other questions from the board on this topic? If not, I move to approve Warren Township High School District 121 return to school plan with a blended learning plan and a fully remote learning plan. And implementation and necessary revisions to this plan can take place with superintendent approval for the 2021 school year.
Second, Jonita.
Roll call.
Sorry, had to unmute. Motion by Schultz, second by Wilson. Mr. DeMonte,
Yes.
Mr. Walls,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mrs. Beals,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
7 yes, motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Love. Next up on the agenda is the second chance to the reception of visitors. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a chance for anybody from the community who's out there who'd like to address the board. You're more than welcome to spend about 3 minutes addressing the board. Keep in mind, it's a dialogue, not a conversation, but your input is always greatly appreciated. If you'd like to address the board, put your name in the chat room and unmute your mic. If Blake Thomas is still out there, feel free to address the board now.
I want to thank you, Mr. Schultz, and board members, Assistant Superintendent Geocaris, Superintendent Algram. My comments concern your return to school plan and the prospect of in-person instruction this fall. I've been a member of this community for many years. My child has been raised and attends school in this community. My partner is a teacher in this community. Further, I've spent the better part of a decade working on behalf of classrooms in this community and this country. I say this so that you understand my motivation in speaking to you is to see us all serve our community. I'm not an educator nor an epidemiologist, but I, like so many of us, am not uninformed. I synthesize information, I heed expertise and scientific research. Speaking of that, quote, the more people a student or staff member interacts with, the longer that interaction, the higher risk of COVID-19 spread. Lowest risk, students and teachers engage in virtual-only classes, activities, and events. That's from Considerations for Schools published by the Centers for Disease Control. I'll add, quote, even under best-case assumptions, we estimate that screening will miss more than half of infected people. Most cases missed by screening are fundamentally undetectable because they have not yet developed symptoms and are unaware they were exposed. That is from a paper in the medical journal eLife, which is published by the National Institutes of Health. I understand that students need to feel a personal connection to their education to achieve their best outcomes. I've seen firsthand what a teacher can do for a student, but for that, they must be and feel safe. Nice and kind are not always the same. It would be nice to say that a return to normalcy, even the pale imitation of normalcy provided by 25% time, omnipresent PPE, and in-person instruction would allow us to be and feel safe. I will not be nice today because I must be kind. I kindly implore you to face what Grayslake, Mundelein, many other districts across the state and country have grappled with. Your teachers will tell you, and medical science concur, a return to the classroom will not be or feel safe. You will not improve students' mental health, engagement, or ability to succeed because they will not be or feel safe. You will not improve outcomes for at-risk students, but rather significantly increase the spread of COVID-19 to members of our community, some of whom will suffer life-altering consequences, as nearly 20,000 people in Lake County have already. A few of them will join the nearly 500 neighbors, friends, and family who've lost their lives. I must kindly alert you to the effects of a decision to return to in-person instruction across socioeconomic strata. Families of means motivated to seek lower risk alternatives will join learning pods or online schools. Yet those without will be unable to avail themselves of these options, and so the impact will be most keenly felt by those with the greatest need. Indeed, I'll put a plain face on the fiscal. You are likely to find your ability to serve the community diminishes as your budget chases declining enrollment. Finally, the best kindness that I can offer is a willingness to tell you what others may not. You must brace yourselves to console shaking and tearful parents, students, and staff when the numerically inevitable happens. You'll explain the weight of your decisions, the risks you felt necessary in contravention of expertise and science, and the benefit you imagined could be achieved. It would have been nice, but there will be no kindness that comforts them or you. I kindly ask you to be clear-eyed when you make these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. I appreciate your comments. Andrew Rodbro, would you like to address the board?
Thank you, members of the Board of Education. I'm a faculty member at the Eau Plaine campus in the English department. I'm relieved to hear the superintendent's recommendation to start the year fully remote. I want to take this opportunity to offer some further insight that the start of the 2021 school year should not default to all students in attendance. I grant that some students may have particular needs best met in person, but that should not require all students in attendance, even in the alpha split model that was being described earlier, if you will. I do not desire to rehearse the increased risks associated with increased exposure to others, as those have been discussed at length already. But I would instead like to address concerns that the hybrid plan seems to be trying to address. For instance, I share the concern for the academic development of students that others have with fully remote learning situation. Last semester demonstrated that a fully remote schedule is less than ideal. Nevertheless, it was not an unmitigated failure by any means. Even the makeshift nature of online teaching and learning, necessitated by the urgency of the pandemic, resulted in successful learning to some degree. Teachers are responsive to the needs of students, and we learned quite a lot about what works best from our experience last semester. Moreover, we have been conducting professional development over the summer to increase our knowledge of the technologies available to meet students' needs and to hone our skills in using those technologies. We are well prepared to start the school year with remote teaching and learning and accomplish learning success. I admit that remote teaching and learning is not ideal. The ideal, of course, is to have fully in-person instruction. We all know that that's not possible. But the hybrid model under consideration doesn't offer the benefits of fully in-person instruction, if you will. The necessity of physical distancing limits the kind of assistance teachers can provide students and the types of activities teachers can assign to students. For instance, a teacher and student can't look over a paper together. Group work and other student interactions have to be curtailed. Institutions are invented to serve humans' needs. Humans don't accommodate their needs to the function of an institution. I fear that the urgency to fill the school with school children again is accommodating students' needs to the function of the institution. We were able to achieve some success last semester because we have the creativity and innovation required to nimbly shift course and accommodate the needs of our students. And I understand the concern that students may experience some deficits in a remote learning situation. But I would reiterate that institutions are created to serve humans' needs. When the pandemic is over, God willing, sooner rather than later, we will deploy our creativity and innovation again to meet those new needs of our students. At this moment, the needs that this institution has to meet include stopping the spread of coronavirus. I don't think that can be accomplished with the hybrid model, at least for now. And I thank you for your favorable view of starting remotely. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Rodborough. Jean Schmidt-Gill, would you like to address the board now?
Yes, I would. Thanks. Hold on a second. There's two of us. Okay, just two questions for the board to bring to committees when planning for when we do go back to the hybrid model. I'm a parent of a child with a very serious chronic lung condition, and our physician teams and I have developed a plan for when. This is upsetting for me because I really want to come back to work, but we've had very frank and stark conversations about when we have to stop putting ourselves at risk by going to school. And that plan really depends on percentages of kids that are sick in the building. So I would hope, and I know I'm not the only person who lives with a family member with a chronic disease, but I would hope that somewhere in the plan, obviously not names, but if you could give us percentages of kids presenting with symptoms on a weekly basis, that helps us better mitigate our own risks because our risks are higher than your average student and or faculty. The other question that I pose or things that I would like you to consider as Mr. Thomas shared, and this is a very real and scary concern for me, but when students and staff become very critically ill and are hospitalized, and if some lose their lives, we need more than a form letter to go out to families and staff or an email through the day. We're going to need crisis intervention, just like we do when a student takes their life, when a student dies in a tragic accident. We need those plans in place because inevitably it will happen, and it's going to happen to our weakest members. And they are just as important as our healthiest students, and it might happen to our healthiest students and our healthiest staff members. And I just ask that these are things that you consider when you put together our screenings and our plans for hybrid. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for considering the safety of staff and students, more importantly students, but and staff for starting remote. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Gene, I appreciate your comments and I appreciate your concerns very much. Kristen Boge, would you like to address the board now? Kristen, are you out there? Okay, we'll move on. Jennifer Del Vecchio, would you like to address the board now?
Yeah, actually I would. I hope you guys can see me. I just turned the camera on. I agree with Mr. Thomas. I appreciate all of the thought that has gone into this. I agree. I am also a teacher, not at Warren, but I am a teacher in another district. And I do agree that starting remotely is the best way to go. My concern is there are classes at Warren that are hands-on. The applied arts classes, some art classes, band, all of these hands-on classes. Is there a plan for those teachers to still be able to deliver what they need to deliver in a 100% remote environment? And that they're just the presents are not conducive to remote. And is there a plan for those teachers to address that? How are they going to do what they need to do? How are they going to do a hands-on assignment when there are students like Woods? My daughter, for example, is in Woods. She's also in band. She's taking Woods. Not everybody will have the tools that they need to do an assignment at home. We probably do because my husband collects tools, but not everybody does. What do you do with those kids that take these classes but can't do them at home or do them outside of a school environment? How is band going to rehearse virtually I mean, the band teachers did a phenomenal job in the spring with what they had to do. But how can you rehearse a band virtually? Things like this, are those being considered as well? That's my big question, is for those kids that thrive on the hands-on, how are their needs gonna be met? I'm done.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate it very, very much. Next up, Kristen Bowes, you're unmuted now. Would you like to address the board?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the forum tonight, and thank you for all the work that the school board has done, as well as the superintendent. It's been very helpful to hear. However, I am extremely disappointed to hear that the school is not ready to go back to a blended model this fall. I'm strongly advocating for the school to work hard over these next few weeks to close the gaps, because there are businesses that have been able to overcome many of the barriers that the school district has put forth in a much shorter time. Many businesses were forced to go back very early and provide a lot of these services to their employees. So just a few reasons why we personally feel that in-person learning is extremely important, especially as we are in phase 4 of Illinois. So I'm sure you all know that the American Academy of Pediatrics strongly advocates that all policy considerations for the coming school year should start with the goal of students physically being present in the schools. Schools are developing more than just an academic set of knowledge. You know, we talked about sports and other things, but schools are important for children's social and emotional development. So we, as others have pointed out, we're not designed to live in isolation. It's a dangerous trend that we have already seen severe impacts in regards to. There's been an increase in reported cases of abuse, depression, suicidal tendencies. A Safe Place in Gurnee has had a large uptick in the number of contacts since the start of the pandemic. Scientific evidence continues to indicate that younger children aren't as affected as easily, and the rates decrease by taking the precautions that we are all talking about here: the social distancing, the masks, the hand washing. The school district has put a lot of thought into the ABCD plan, and I feel that it would be a very safe and controlled way to start the school year. Instead of continuing to plan for the what-if scenarios of students physically infecting other students and ignoring the real data that social isolation is already causing, that's impacting students' emotional well-being, is being short-sighted. Second, Warren is a diverse district. Again, as we've all talked about, beyond supporting the education of students, the school is a critical component and levels the playing field when it comes to social and racial equality. So many students don't have stable technology at home. Many students don't have a dedicated workspace. They don't have a supportive adult assisting them. They don't have 3 meals a day. They don't even have a safe place at home. So by expecting students like this to participate in a 100% remote learning, we're simply fooling ourselves that they'll be anywhere near where they would be if they were in a stable environment in the school. We will be failing them, and the gap will widen in terms of inequality. Lastly, by not taking advantage of Lake and McHenry being in phase 4 of the current moment is sad and troubling. We will likely have a window where schools can operate in person that we should take advantage of. I encourage the schools to continue to think creatively, using the space at schools like the gym, the field house, outside while the weather is cooperative, in addition to partnering with other leaders in Gurnee, such as the churches, vacant retail space, the park district, the mayor. How can we in Gurnee come together to creatively solve for how to best educate our children in this unusual school year ahead? By doing anything less, we're only doing a disservice to our children in the district. Again, I please implore you to please consider sending our kids back to school in August to start the school year. Thank you.
Thank you. I very much appreciate your thoughts and your comments. Next up, Sherry Peck, would you like to address the board now?
Actually, it's her husband, Matt, but that's okay. I'm a little bit of a shoot from the hip person. I don't have notes like obviously some others have prepared, but you know, I had some talking points and some of them you've already answered for us. But my question is, especially to Kristen Boss, who just actually spoke, you know, wanting us to go back to school, I could, you know, everybody's family is a little bit different. Mine, I am an outside salesperson. I meet with customers face to face across many different counties and states. My wife is a teacher who her school district is pushing forward with in, you know, person learning. we have 3 high school kids within the school district, 2 just coming into the school freshman year, 1 in his senior year. And, you know, all those factors, everybody, I mean, all those touches inside out, it just is a chance that it brings it back into our household. And then once it's in our household, then we spread it to other areas. So if it comes from me, comes in my house, it ends up within the Woodland School District and within the Warren School District. If it's from the Warren School District, you know, it ends up in the Woodland School District. I just don't see how you guys can safely do it. And obviously, you know, John, I agree with you leading this and some of the others that we should start with remote learning, you know, through October 1st. But honestly, I don't see how we can move forward until we are 100% sure that everybody's going to be safe, particularly teachers, students. You have, you know, bus drivers, custodians, your staff within your offices. But besides that, there's just, you know, so many things too that it's almost hypocritical that we're all meeting face to face over a screen, yet we expect our kids and our teachers to meet face to face. And, you know, if we push past that, one of the lesser important things, but still important, because you guys talked about your financials earlier, that we were in a deficit at this point, but wouldn't it make more sense running the schools where you have the heat or the AC on at a minimum, you have lesser staff, you have lights off in certain areas, and we're able to reduce some costs to offset some of the costs that you've had to incur, you know, with additional Chromebooks and on some of the technologies that you've had to spend that you did not expect to a year ago. That's what I have. I don't know if anybody was taking notes to answer all the multiple questions, but that's where I'm at. I'm done. Anybody want to answer?
No, it's me. I just want to say I appreciate your comments. I was struggling to find my unmute button, so thank you very much for your comments. Is there anybody else out there that would like to address the board at this time? If not, I would just like to thank everybody who participated, who listened. Everybody's feedback is greatly appreciated and very much needed. So thank you, everyone. If there's nothing else, I move to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion, excuse me, motion by Schultz, second by Anderson. Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. DeMonte?
Yes.
Mrs. Beals?
Yes.
Mr. Walls? We'll go to Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Walls, one more time.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I'm not, yes.
Okay, and Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
Thank you. I have 7 yes. Motion carries.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. A great
Thank
week.
you.
Be safe.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, board members.